turn that down?
I did.
I thought you were purposely putting me on the hot seat.
I was putting a little more heat into the room, just to kind of keep
I mean,
everybody.
come on, man.
The heat is on.
So the clock on the wall says 6 p.m. So I think we're ready to come to order. And we want a roll call. Got to get Josh calmed down. Can we start down there for a roll call?
Tammy Schmidt-Kirk, lay member.
Josh Ballack, lay member.
Valerie Lovelace, council member.
Linda Barkey, lay person.
Rick Riker, council member.
Tom Bradbeer, lay.
Tom Brandis, lay.
J.C. Rowley, finance director.
Gordon Langenbeck, lay.
Kirk Collins, city council.
Trip Androy, lay member.
Rob Pell, City Council.
Jason Javarone, lay member.
And Joel King is celebrating his anniversary tonight, so I told him he can go out.
Vanessa Auger, City Council.
Perfect. We let Aaron start down there, so he didn't have to run down there from here. So here we go.
Although I didn't get my steps in today, so maybe I should have started up there, so I could have gotten a few more, I don't know. So, good evening, council, budget committee members. It's my pleasure to present the administration department's budget for fiscal year 23. With me today, I have Ken Selland, IT manager, and I have Karen Firk, city recorder, and I have Diana Mejia, HR director, and they're here to help assist me with any potential deep technical questions. So I'll briefly just mention council goals and strategic plan and then move into a couple of departments here. The department organization is, and we'll take a look at each one of these: mayor and council, policy and legislation, management services, legal services, administrative services, general insurance, human resources, workers' compensation, and information technology. First, starting off with the strategic plan, as we talked before the first night of the budget committee meeting, the strategic plan really drives the budget. It provides an opportunity for us to get direction from council on what they'd like to see on level of service and their goals, which then we can adhere resources to, which the budget committee through this process allocates resources for. The budget that you've seen and heard from all the other divisions and departments have encompassed all of council goals and work plan elements. So we'll move right into the mayor and council budget. That's on page 115 of your budget book, if you'd like to follow along. This includes meeting costs, television recordings, which we're doing like tonight, travel and training, advertising for committees, community surveys, some funds for committees and special projects as council deems appropriate. This portion of the budget directly supports council in developing council goals and the city work plan. So it's been a relatively flat budget with a total difference of $9,708. With the majority of those items staying pretty consistent. Contractual services for this line is similar to what I just mentioned on the previous slide. It really does take a look at election costs, provides monies and resources for a community survey, different committee expenses, RVTV, recording all of the council meetings and special meetings that we have in here, televising, etc., and then memberships, training, and travel.
Any questions for Aaron?
So the next one is on page 117. This is policy and legislation, general program operations. This budget is established for general engineering, capital transfers, contingencies, and any fund balance. So this is one that's got some larger numbers associated with it because it has the ending fund balance and contingency and the contingency associated with it. So here we're up by $296,000. Contractual and professional services is up by $49,000. That represents an increase due to council direction through a level of service change, which was for the city to take on responsibility of Art Along the Road, the holiday tree lighting, and a potential 4th of July celebration for 2023. Any questions?
Go ahead.
So I was taking a look here at the contingencies. It says $2 million. I think there were some contingencies in other places that seem to be a little larger than that. Is this only for the general fund budget, and then there's direct funding that are for specific contingencies for specific programs? Or is this $2 million in contingencies for everything throughout the entire budget?
No, this is just for the general fund portion.
Just general funds?
Yes.
Okay.
You'll see like you said, you'll see other contingencies associated with other divisions and departments.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Valerie?
Yes, thank you, Aaron. I have a question about, because the other money that comes through for tourism comes through the community development. So I just want clarification on this part of money for these events is coming through a different part of the budget. Can you explain that to me a little bit?
These funds are, the majority, I believe these funds are general fund dollars, so they're not travel and tourism lodging dollars, but they're general fund dollars that go to those programs, those event programs.
So that is part of that 2% of the 30%, am I correct or no? So that, I guess that's where I'm unclear, is because I know when we talked about funding those, we talked about using tourism money that was still there after we paid the DMO for their services.
So maybe Adam can jump in and state exactly where those came from. I believe these are general fund dollars and not lodging tax dollars.
Okay.
Aaron, that's correct. The expenditure budget here in this particular division is using discretionary dollars and is not in any way tied to the restrictions that come along with using lodging tax dollars and needing those to be associated with tourism. We are, of course, investigating all avenues by which we can appropriately use lodging taxes on events, but this budget provides the flexibility for council to still support events even if they're not directly tied to tourism promotion.
Okay, great. And I knew that was the focus of what we wanted to do, because I was just unsure of that extra 2% that is not part of the 30%. So whether that just generally goes into the general fund or if it stays in the tourism part of the budget.
So the part that's not allocated strictly to travel and tourism expenses and has some flexibility is all accounted for in the budget and has been in the past, versus the overage that we got, the 450,000 or 400,000, that percentage of that overage increase is dedicated for travel and tourism type activities.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Go ahead, Josh.
Just to follow up, would these this increase in cost, could it go under the travel and tourism if you guys chose to? Did you look into if tourism dollars could be spent on this?
Yes, Adam and I had an in-depth conversation about the use of the travel and tourism dollars associated with that, and really took a look at the Oregon Revised Statutes that dictates what you can use those for. One of the key things, and maybe at some point in time, some of these events will maybe get to a point where they are larger in scale or more of a destination, but you can use travel and tourism dollars if it's a true destination event. Say, for instance, some of the larger events like Boatnik or Back to the 50s, where there's a demonstrated increase in lodging because people are coming from a radius, according to Oregon Revised Statutes, of over 50 miles. So when you start to see that occurring, that's when the lodging taxes can potentially be used for events. You can also use it for any kind of advertising outside that circle of 50 miles. And that's why it's easy for us to give 28% of that just to the DMO because they're focusing on advertising outside of our region.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Next one is on page 245. This is management services. So this is management services is sort of a general administrative service fee for the purpose of providing additional funding for central services that a number of all of our divisions and departments utilize, like personnel, payroll, finance, legal, and other support services. There's a 6.3% of actual program costs charged to those divisions. 2% is applied to all capital project construction. So under management services, we're talking about the implementation of council policy and city goals. The citywide administration is housed here. Budget process and direction is housed here. Legislative support, internal, external, public relations, and intergovernmental relations are all housed in this portion of administrative services. So we have here an increase this year from 22 to 23, a total requirement increase of $49,000. There is a small increase in, the biggest increase of all of the categories is personal services of $39,000, and that increase really represents PERS and health insurance costs associated with FTEs.
Questions? Go ahead, Vanessa. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead,
That's okay.
Valerie.
I'm back.
I know your
so
name started
know.
with a V.
I just have a question. Oops. Now you won't know who I am.
Nameless.
Anyway, when you're talking about the people in the Office of Personnel, you're talking about people in your direct office. Am I correct? So is that the personnel that you're
Yes,
talking
that's the
about?
admin office. That's the Diane and Julie and myself and Karen and yes. Mhm.
And I guess my question goes back to the information coordinator that at one point we had, who has not been working there for a while. Is that job still being held?
We are still recruiting for that position. It is open and financed in the budget.
Okay, so that's what I was curious about. So thank you.
Go ahead, Tammy.
How do you determine the 6.3% that you charge to the programs and the 2% for capital? Is that it's something that changes from year to year, or is it the same?
It does change to some degree. We try to accomplish the amount of percentage that funds the services that are being provided. And I think even this year it might have gone down a little bit to make sure that we are not gathering too much of a percentage. We also check with industry standards to see what other communities are charging for administrative costs. And we're actually on the lower end of what we've been looking at before in the past with other cities and what they charge for administrative fees.
Other questions? Oh, Tom.
When the charter is amended and counselors are finally entitled to compensation, is this the account that would support that?
Well, I hadn't thought about where that might fit. I don't know if Adam or JC might have a suggestion on where that would go if that passes. One of the ones that I'm talking about this evening, it would though.
Adam,
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start first and certainly fill in any holes. That's a great question. Aaron already covered the mayor and council budget, which is currently part of the general fund and is only funded by discretionary funding sources. For councilors to start getting paid, that would increase the mayor and council expenditure budget, which would create additional demand on the general support that it currently uses. An alternative to that single funding source of general support would be to move the mayor and council division into the administrative fund, and it would remain the mayor and council division, but rather than only using general support dollars, it would be funded through that same 6.3% indirect funding mechanism by which all of the departments throughout the city would help to support that activity within the mayor and council division. So that's just one idea. There are other alternatives, but it's definitely something that has certainly crossed our minds as that conversation approaches.
Other questions? Go ahead. Go ahead, Aaron.
So the next one is legal services. So this encompasses the legal questions, things we deal with for contracts, ordinances, representation and legal actions, land use issues, legal advice to council and staff, and also part of the land acquisition along with the city manager under legal services. So this is relatively flat. Overall, there was an increase of about $5,000. The real change here is if you look at personnel services, it's an increase of $181,000. But if you look at contractual professional services, it's a decrease of $178,000. So that just represents going from a contract attorney to an in-house attorney.
Questions? Go ahead.
Administrative services, general program operations. So this is internal support, employee education and recognition, copies, general office services, postage, phone services, and there's also contingency associated with this. So overall, it is increased to $102,000. There's contractual services, capital outlay. Contractual services increased a little bit. Capital outlay did increase. The big increase in capital outlay, looking at that one, is the biggest one. That's due to us needing to purchase 2 large copy machines, the really fast, productive ones that CD uses, that admin uses, etc. It was just time for them to be renewed. So.
Questions? Yeah, go ahead.
What's the explanation for contingencies being such a large part of the total requirements in this program?
Adam, you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's essentially just the fund balance within the administrative fund. And as it was mentioned, Aaron was correct when he mentioned before that we actually did reduce that administrative services fee. It was 6.4% last year, and this coming into FY23, it's going to be 6.3% to keep that contingency where it should be instead of being a little bit high. We did consider the possibility of reducing that fee even further, which would have reduced this available contingency even more. However, with the potential of moving mayor and council with some additional expenditures into this fund, we didn't want to yo-yo, I hope you'll forgive the term, but yo-yo the rest of the departments by reducing the fee in 1 year only to raise it back up significantly the following year. So trying to ease into that if in fact that does come about.
So would it be fair to say that contingency line is kind of there to stabilize the 6.3% fee in regards to all the revenue volatility in the other departments?
It could be used for that, certainly, yes. And the Administrative Services Fund does have its own fund balance policy, of which it's actually slightly higher than the policy is, which is why I mentioned we're trying to bring that down a little bit, but not too much in a single year.
Go ahead, Josh.
Just kind of cheating and looking ahead, can those contingencies be used for PERS costs in future out years?
They could be, and that's certainly a possible use of those funds. Of course, to do so would drastically, or depending on the amount that was used for those PERS costs, would then reduce the fund balance of the admin services fund. And of course, it's still trying to remain within fund balance policy as well. So, but yeah, I believe that is an area that could be looked at if we absolutely needed some additional funds for PERS.
Rick?
So on the contingencies, could that amount be 30 or 40% of the total requirement? Is that an appropriate percentage when we refer to contingencies, or am I mixing that up with some other?
Well, 30 to 40% is the general fund. I think this one's 15 to 25. Adam might be.
Right, so your contingencies and your ending fund balance are both help to make up that fund balance policy. The line item that is named contingencies is specifically to give council the flexibility throughout the year to do a transfer of appropriations with just a resolution. So staff cannot at all touch this $1.2 million of contingency, but council could pass a resolution and reappropriate those resources into one of those other line items that you see there on the table. So it's money that's being held aside, slightly more restricted, but still available for council if they so desired.
Thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead, Aaron.
All right, general insurance. So the city is a member of City County Insurance Services, which is a conglomerate. It's a group of cities and municipalities, special districts, et cetera, that come together to pool their resources for insurance. We're insured by general liability, auto, cyber liability, excess liability, et cetera. So we have the majority of our insurance coverage through City County Insurance Services. Let's see, that total requirements have increased by $48,000. Contractual and professional services really represents legal services, general liability insurance, and the contractual services are a little higher this year. And this was something we just recently found out. There was an increase from the amount of stormwater miles. We were actually low on our inventory we had it scheduled at like 138 when the mileage is actually 278. That increase in inventory jumped the price up a little bit, but it's the true correct number that we are now needing to pay. So that's what that represents from an increase primarily in the contractual professional services.
So I'll ask the first question. You said legal was in there. Isn't legal already separated out, and that's the extra 180 that just got moved from one to the other? In other words, we have an in-house attorney. Is this legal beyond that?
Yes, yeah, there's a number of other things that we may use CIS for, like pre-loss and those kind of things. If there's a claim against the city, if it's an insurance claim, we will use their legal services. So
thank you.
That is provided.
Other questions? Go ahead, Tammy.
So I saw that workers' comp is a different section. Is it not a part of this for a reason, or is it not provided through this fund?
Do you want me to take that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there are two different coverages. And so CIS used to cover both of ours, but now CIS only covers our general liability and property, where the Safe Corporation now covers workers' comp. And so they're kind of two different animals, and we get charged kind of two different ways to kind of pay for those services.
You were going to say something else.
Yeah, as to add on to what Aaron is saying, we do have a walk-in that provides with the screen sheet of page 289 of that change of the costs, and it is highlighted as far as kind of a orangish color as far as those increases that we are seeing. So it's considered a walk-in in my line of work in the sense that we just got the bill about 5 days ago, and so we are trying to make that change to reflect the most current information that we have.
Other questions? Go ahead, Aaron.
All right, here's
Wait
the fund.
hang on a sec, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
I was taking a look, you guys look like you spent down about $75,000 in contingencies. The way the funding structure works, are you expecting like is this gonna create a kind of deficit spend for a while until we can kind of figure stuff out? Or is this kind of a increase the rate and then we'll kind of be flat probably going forward, considering now that we know that we got the right amount of storm miles reported?
I can take this too. So yeah, so once we also had an appraisal done recently too, which increased the value of some of our properties, which is increasing the rate. We also have some large pending lawsuits, litigations that we haven't paid out yet, but they are on our kind of history for the next 5 years. And so we're seeing an increase from that. Obviously, we're probably going to have an increase in next year. Hopefully it's not as drastic as we're seeing. But we're already taking steps to put that fund balance back. As you're seeing the fund balance kind of go down in fiscal year 24, we're already taking steps right now in fiscal year 22 to look at potentially charging departments a little bit extra in this year to make sure we kind of maybe smooth out that cost over time.
Now go ahead.
Right. This is a great division, human resources. Human resources internally does our classification, compensation plans, recruitment and selection, labor relations, negotiations, administration of personal policies, benefits administration, risk management. There are 4 FT associated with this division. We have, with this, I think we have around 225 or so employees, and so they've been very busy, especially through this new world that we're in when it comes to recruitment of staff, and especially COVID. COVID provided an extra responsibility onto HR that really put a lot of burden on them, and they did a great job working through the pandemic with what we had. So talking about the different parts here, we have an increase of $160,000. The main portion of that comes from personal services of $132,000. That represents the addition of 1 FTE, which is a personnel technician associated with the budget.
Questions? Go ahead.
Workers' comp. This is wage replacement for injuries or illness care. We're insured through SAFE, which helps us with our claim processing, risk management services, and our return to work program, which we've taken and utilized. The SAFE committee is required by OSHA, and so we do have a safety committee. Their responsibilities include reviewing injuries and accidents, conducting job hazard analysis, review and update safety policies, investigate workers' comp claims, conduct site inspections, provide safety training. They're very active within our organization, and they've really helped point out things that help keep us safe and help us with regards to any pre-loss issues. So taking a look at this budget, it is up $217,000. That's primarily up in contingencies. Departments are charged actual rates, so this varies a little bit. The lower claims that we've had represents a little bit of a higher balance this year. We do need to maintain a higher balance in this temporarily while we're working through closing out some of our CIS 5-year liabilities that we have. And so that's why it's there in that fashion.
Questions? Gordon.
How many people do you currently have on a workman's comp? And after running a 2,000-person organization, you need to stay on those people almost daily if you don't want your claims to go out of sight.
Diana, you want to come up and talk about workers' comp?
So I'm assuming what you mean is how, do we have any out right now, like on time loss that are not able to work? We do not currently have any who are out. All of our employees are currently working. And we do work very hard to get them back in the workplace when they're injured, get them into a light duty spot. That's what those funds, that 57,000 that we've recuperated over the last 5 years, those are light duty funds that have come back to us from the state.
Other questions? Go ahead, Aaron.
Next is Information Technology Division. We provide a lot of services, 340 different end-user devices within the organization with 100 different servers, 190 different phones, 100 network devices, data backup and protection. Security has definitely been an item of discussion with Ken and I, especially recently with everything that's going on in the world and how the world actually affects Little Grants Pass. So they're a very busy group of great colleagues. So this is gone down by $97,000. Primarily that is due to a contingency going down, and that is just, we're just trying to make sure that we keep a healthy contingency, and this was one of those that was sort of outside its financial parameters because it was a little high, so we're reducing that to get it down into its financial parameter.
Questions?
Question. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm just curious how we're keeping personnel services flat in this program. I mean, every other department has step raises at the minimum.
I think it was due to we had one vacancy, we had one leave, and when they came on at lower rates than what was there. And so that provided an opportunity for us to remain relatively flat.
There's also a reduction of 0.5 FTE for the webmaster.
Other questions? Vanessa?
I apologize, I'm taking a step back to workman's comp again. At the bottom of page 285, there is a chart that explains the claims paid. And on the following page, it shows injuries reported. I'm showing for FY22, injuries are really within the average amount of other years reported, yet the amount of claims that are paid out is a pretty significant jump. I was hoping to receive some information on that.
Let's turn to the page here and I'll get Diana to come up and talk about that. You have the book? Okay.
You have to help me out, Vanessa, because I was in the back row talking.
No problem.
Sorry.
That's okay. Page 285.
Okay.
At the very bottom.
At the very bottom.
And then on the very next page, 286, it'll display a chart with the amount of injuries for the same fiscal years.
So you're wanting to know that the increase in its relation to the number of injured, or?
I'm showing, according to the chart on page 286, that FY22, the amount of injuries reported is within the average amount from previous years, but the claims paid is significantly higher.
So the claims that were paid under this particular one fell within the COVID years that happened. So the state made the rule that that if COVID claims could be filed under workers' comp, if it was found that somebody may have gotten COVID through the workplace. Because with your essential workers, we weren't allowed to have employees who were not working, so dispatch, police, fire, public works, everybody's still out there. We had very large claims that came in under COVID. And those are not impacting our claims this year, but we may see an impact to them in the next couple of years as the mod factor is looked at based upon that year. So those claims are so much higher because of the COVID.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Go ahead, Aaron.
All right, well, that actually concludes my portion of the presentation, where we would then be going into some finance portion of it, and I would like to conclude with a homage to a former staff member who, Laura Glover, who would always end her presentations with pictures of puppies. So I thought, Laura, shout out to you. There's my conclusion slide. And I dropped the mic. JC, I think you might be next. It's tough to follow, isn't it? Finance and services. There you go.
Thank you. Oh, did you want?
No, if they're not in your way.
No, that should be fine. Can you guys hear me all right? Adam, are you still there?
Indeed, sir. Good luck.
All right. Forcing me to do this. Before I get started, I'd like to take a few moments to publicly recognize Adam Schultz for sticking around and helping usher the City of Grants Pass through the budget process and make my transition as easy as possible.
JC?
Yeah. Oh, am I not close enough? Sorry. Let me start over again. Before I get started, I'd like to take a few moments to publicly recognize Adam Schultz for sticking around and helping usher the City of Grants Pass through the budget process and make my transition as easy as possible. He has built and maintained a fabulous staff and department and has left some pretty big shoes for me to fill. So, without further ado, we'll go to the best department in the city, the finance department.
Oh, my.
So here's a little bit of the presentation outline. We're going to go through a little department organization, some council goals, department by division, which there's really only one for finance services, department efficiencies, future challenges, and then I'm going to go over some benefits and administration and specifically some PER stuff. And then Adam, as his swan song, will go through the auxiliary funds. So we really have kind of like two sides of financial services. This is kind of what I call the back end. These are the people that we don't necessarily interact with a lot of the public, but we still do have some interaction. That has to do with our budgeting, audit, accounts receivable, accounts payable, payroll, treasury, grants, miscellaneous billing, and other support services. And then this is what I like to call the front of the house, the customer service people, the people that have a lot of interaction with our citizens as far as utility billing, utility customer service, business tax, lodging tax, parking tickets, and so on and so forth. So our council goals and objectives for finance, obviously objective number one through the strategic plan has been to find a permanent funding source for public safety. As well as for the auxiliary funds is to facilitate an environment to encourage business prosperity and economic opportunities. So here's at a glance some of those numbers that you see on page 249. You'll see that personnel services is a sizable increase, potentially for a smaller department. However, this is budgeting the finance director position and the accountant position that were up for my position recently vacant, and then we still have a vacancy as far as an accountant. We also have some contractual services increases there that have to do with some banking fees, computer software, printing, postage, computer replacement, so on and so forth. The direct charge is the square footage imprint that we have at City Hall. And then that capital outlay line of the 17,000, that is the same line that Jason mentioned at last Thursday, and that is that folding machine. So again, the personnel budget was developed with filling those two vacancies, me being one of them and an accountant. There's also, obviously, with that increase comes with what everybody else has been talking about, with PERS increases and medical insurance and other benefits. We have some other contractual services for meter reading, bank services, financial software, printing, mailing, traveling. So we do have some finance efficiencies that we've seen in the past, obviously through some check scanning. IVR has been a big one. We are always looking to improve ourselves in the future. We're actually looking to gain some efficiencies here by creating a newer online presence where we don't take online payments for certain things, and we're currently in talks with some vendors as far as creating that, so that way we can potentially create that efficiency for the citizens of Grants Pass. As far as the staffing, that contractual services for stuffing and mail, that is Aspire. And then as part of the history, we do have a reduction of 1 FTE as of fiscal year 21. We have maintained that reduction due to that IVR implementation, and so we don't need to add that 1 FTE back. So our future challenges, we have a utilization of added functionality with the financial system. We're constantly updating, maintaining, even though, again, it seems like the project's closed, there's always something to do with a computer system. We always have new unfunded mandates that come down of new accounting and budget requirements that we're supposed to meet. We also are going to be heavily handed in the compliance with expenditures of federal funds, such as the ARPA dollars and obviously the CARES Act money. And then, as well as everybody else knows, the water treatment plant that is on the forefront of everybody's mind. And then before I move on to questions, I would like to mention that the city is blessed with a fantastic finance staff, and haven't been here long enough to take any credit for that. Obviously, Adam's done a great job in facilitating this team. I'd like to also recognize Kimberly Gasperson, who oversees our customer service, who does a great job of running that area, as well as training people. She has been successful at recruiting the right people for the organization as finance and other departments that always seem to poach from her staff. And as well as Mitty Ellerman, the accounting supervisor, who we have her blood, sweat, and tears to thank for the award-winning budget documents that are sitting in front of you, as well as the capital budget. With that, do you have any questions?
Tom?
About electronic payments. The ability to use paperless billing for utilities and to have an automatic debit of one's checking account, it seems so efficient and so logical both for customers and for the city. Do you have a sense of how many utility customers use that?
I could probably get an exact percentage or close to.
I would venture to guess that about 20% of our customers take those funds directly out of their bank accounts, and you probably have another 20% who send them from their bank. So probably close to 40% of our customers are either having us withdraw that directly on bill due date or sending that electronically to us. And that's a significant increase over the years. It only increases. We process less and less mail.
Is there a marketing effort to try to get 60, 70% to use it?
I don't think that there's a marketing effort. There is a piece of conversation that happens with setup. So when a customer calls in and says, I want to set up services, we do tell them we can auto draft this from their bank, et cetera, or this is how we'd like you to set it up. Part of the welcome letter includes those options for customers too, if they want a bank draft or if they want to set things up to come automatically out of their accounts.
Thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead, Gordon.
Under personnel services, do I assume that you manage the billing clerks for water, but Jason picks up the tab?
Yeah, it's a quirky kind of like internal kind of charge. So we have the full personnel costs, and then we direct charge Jason for the majority of those costs.
Other questions? Okay, you're on.
So we're going into the Benefits Administration Fund. And so in the wellness program, there's a fitness reimbursement to encourage healthy behaviors that improve employee engagement and reduce health insurance utilization. There's a wellness committee that meets several times per year to plan events and prepare educational information for staff. As well as in this fund, we have the Public Employee Retirement System, PERS, internal reserve that has been mentioned over and over in different facets throughout these few meetings. So as far as the Benefits Administration Fund, public employees or PERS rate increases began in July 1 of 2021. The city has established a Public Employees Retirement System reserve to prepare for future increases by charging slightly different internal rates. Under the rules of the PERS system rate changes, rates have generally been increasing about 3% every 2 years because they are on a biennium until the PERS system is back up to 100% funded. We do have some internal charges that can differ from our exact rate that PERS charges us. depending on what we are seeing and what we can accomplish with that, giving money back through that PERS reserve. So a 3% increase to PERS rates is slightly more than $619,000 as a whole for the city. And then actual city increase for, as you can see, 7/1 of 2019 was about 4.43%. And then due to Oregon Senate Bill 1049, that reduced our IEP contribution. So PERS rates predicted to increase in a similar amount to gain as of the 2023 year, likely reaching a system-wide average of close to 30% of payroll and stay high for many years. I believe in my time I've been a public servant. They always have this graph that shows PERS rates going down at some point in the future, but I feel like they keep pushing the year out and it's the same graph year after year. So they keep telling us it's going to go down, but I highly doubt that. So our PERS reserve is projected at year-end fiscal 22 of about $2.3 million. We began using that reserve in fiscal year 20 and will continue in fiscal year 23. And so we do have two options to use the remaining funds, is to continue to provide discounts to departments over the next 5 years to kind of slowly mitigate those rise in PERS costs, or contribute $2 million to PERS, a PERS side account that would immediately match 25% or about $500,000. And this is a picture on page 316 in your book. As you will see in a couple slides, this will be shown in the changes as far as the categories as moving down to that zero balance in 2023. In fiscal year 21, $2 million was budgeted to contribute to public employees retirement system side account to take advantage of the employer incentive fund. This option has came back in this next year. The recommended budget only uses about $340,000 of that PERS reserve to decrease the PERS rate throughout the city, and then possibly contributing the $2 million. So this is just giving the authority to contribute those $2 million, not necessarily that that is 100% decided, as we could potentially pivot that if that's what council were to decide. So as you can see, the personnel services, that difference is making that $2 million PERS contribution, and then that $2 million is coming out of contingency.
You, knock, knock. I just had a question. I just had a question, a clarification actually. So you're saying that at 20, because we did in 21 agree to do that 2 million, but we didn't, it didn't happen because of, we didn't, so many people just snapped it up that we just kind of were put on a list, and they're reopening it again in 2023. Is that my perception? And so we still have that money, and so that will be something that the council would decide at one point to do that. Am I correct?
Correct. So you made the decision, as far as I understand, to do that way back when COVID hit. They reduced the amount of people that and money that they were going to give out, and so we got put on a waiting list for the City of Grants Pass. And so as time has gone on, that waiting list seems to get longer, and it seems like they're going to potentially open that back up again.
Okay, so how far on the waiting list, just out of curiosity?
I have a note here. We were 27th at some point, and I don't know what that means as far as who is in front of us as far as dollar amounts.
Did they do anybody with the program or no? Was there anybody who got into the first round?
Yes.
Okay. Do we know how many?
That might be an Adam question. Adam, do you know that statistic?
I'm not understanding the question perfectly. How many what?
Well, you said we were 27th or something on the list, and first time they opened it, did some of them come off, were some of them able to use that, so that pushed us up on the list, or is that where we are right now?
So whenever we first applied, we were 13th on the waiting list, and then they realized that they had less money to contribute, which pushed us to 27th on the list. But now basically they're just saying that they have all available funds to fund this employer incentive fund for everybody on the waiting list. So we would definitely be included on that.
Okay, thank you.
Tom?
What a pleasant surprise that the legislature came up with the funds for that 25% match. That's really significant. More than 70% of PERS benefits are paid through investment earnings. And to have a side account with the 25% match means that in the future, rates will not be rising nearly as fast because the investment earnings on that side account will reduce the unfunded liability for the city. I think it's an excellent idea to transfer the $2 million and take advantage of the match.
Tammy?
So I don't see any mention of health insurance, and health insurance for 225 employees is probably pretty expensive. Can you explain that?
So that does get distributed to each department. It's not like a direct, like it comes out of one pot of money. It kind of gets paid for by each of the departments.
Go ahead, Josh.
Just kind of going back to one of the slides, and I would tend to agree with you that we've seen a very static kind of PERS rate over the last decade or so. But I mean, as somebody who worked in the treasurer's office for a little while, like we changed tier 1, and how do I say this politely? They will age out of the program. So once that happens, there's got to be a drop off where we will start to see some return on those changes. What have you seen, and is it's got to be somewhere relatively close, and relatively like maybe 7-10 years away, but it's got to be coming.
They continue to say that, and people are living longer. And so the problem is we're seeing that benefit have to carry out longer, and so the actuarials are pushing those, I guess, life expectancies out, which is keeping the costs at that high level, and so they keep pushing the curve out.
And, sorry, a follow-up on one other thing. So I do know, and I don't know exactly if Grants passed it, but I know a lot of Southern Oregon communities did take out some debt obligation bonds back in the 90s to try to leverage. Was Grants Pass one of those cities, and are we still paying that off? Voice from above, maybe?
Adam might know, but I don't see it. I don't see it on our budget. Whereas where the previous entity I came from, they were issued in 2002, and so the 25 years, 30 years to pay those back would have still be on our books.
That's correct. I'm not aware of the city ever being involved with those, and we absolutely are not paying anything like that back now.
Tom?
So if the reserve goes to zero, will internal build rates then be the same as what PERS is collecting? It'll just be straight through?
Potentially, and so again, that reduction by the side account hopefully offsets that increase from year to year.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead, JC.
And without further ado,
Adam's
the man
on.
of the hour.
Oh.
So let's see, they're probably pulling me up on the screen, but I'm going to take over to finish off this presentation by covering our auxiliary services. And let me know whenever you can see that.
We can see it. Just
All right.
Your intro slide. Yeah, there you go.
Wonderful. So a short list of those auxiliary service funds include the lodging tax fund, debt service for Bancroft bonds, debt service for general obligation bonds, industrial and downtown loan fund, community development block grant, and our environmental waste fees fund. So starting off with probably the most interesting and complicated one is our lodging tax fund. The revenues that come into this fund are the 12% lodging tax revenues that we have, which is then distributed throughout the rest of the city to departments like tourism, public safety, parks, economic, and downtown development departments, as well as land and buildings capital projects. And in that particular fund, it's used for parks acquisition and development, as well as tourism-related facilities. The expenditures that you do see in the lodging tax fund is a small admin direct charge. We also have new this year is an indirect charge for transfers to capital fund. Now, Jason talked about this a little bit in his presentation, but we're doing something new with charging fees to capital projects, and that we're charging it upfront based on the amount that's transferred to capital project fund. And the reason and benefit behind doing it this way is that it will be much more dependable and predictable. So that's why that's new for this year. And then the contractual services that you see directly out of this fund are for the audit fee. Now you'll see that go up a little bit because we now have more lodging facilities, and therefore we need to audit those facilities. We need to audit an extra facility each year in order to keep them all in a good rotation, so that we don't have one entity that hasn't been audited in 10 years or something like that. So definitely keeping an eye on those. Now the lodging tax fund, because it is a special revenue fund, any remainder of those available resources are transferred to the departments, and if we are fortunate to receive more revenues than we budgeted, then we can either wait till the following year to transfer those additional revenues, or we can do a budget adjustment to try and transfer those in the current year. And in fact, we are doing that, and we'll have a supplemental budget coming before council here shortly. This is the second year that we've had the 12% tax rate, which was an increase from the 9% tax rate prior to that. And below is, I apologize, but it's a complicated scramble of all of the different allocations for the different lodging tax percentages. And I can go into that further, but ultimately, let me get a pointer out for you. This number down here, the $3,044,000, is the total lodging tax funds we believe that we'll have available to transfer within the year. And the amounts you see here in this column is the amount that is going to each of these activities that you see in the far left. And then you have the overall total percentage of all funds and how much is going to each activity. So we've got 40% of all available lodging tax funds going to tourism promotion, 11.6% going to tourism-related facilities in the Land and Buildings Capital Fund, 22% to public safety, 14.5% to parks, and 5.83% to both economic development and downtown development. Now, because this one is so interesting, I'll go ahead and pause there if there are any questions on this particular fund.
Go ahead, Gordon.
Now, Warren is going to like me for this. Is it not true that the council looks at the allocation by department? And if public safety is number one, is it not true that you could actually take the money, the parks don't kill me, but couldn't you take the money from Parks, Economic Development, Downtown Development, and give it to Warren and increase his budget by probably about $2.3 million?
If I could answer that first, all of the revenues that go into the general fund, yes, you see here a direct allocation of these resources to the different departments, but ultimately that would just move around the discretionary general support dollars that would be available. So if you sent more lodging taxes to public safety, then parks would require more general support. So that would be the first direct impact. After that, it would really be a question of level of services, which is definitely a council conversation.
Go ahead, Adam.
All right. Next, we have the Debt Service Bancroft Bond Fund. The revenues, we don't currently have a new local improvement district for this, but essentially the revenues that would come into the Bancroft Fund would be borrowings for a local improvement district or repayments of assessments coming back. The expenditures that would come out of the Bancroft Bond Fund would be for debt service on internal and external loans, as well as a small administrative charge. And then if we did get that, you'll see a $500,000 line item in both the revenues and in the transfers out, which is really sitting there as a placeholder in the event that we do create a local improvement district. So that's there just to provide flexibility in the event that that were to happen. Next, we have the debt service general obligation bond. The revenues that come into this particular fund is the public safety bond levy, which is not to be confused with the local option public safety levy, the $1.79. These are not the same. The public safety bond was paid off in 2019, so you're not going to see very much activity into this fund at all. Any revenues that we do see come in are from delinquent property taxes on this bond, and then each year, whatever we do end up collecting throughout the year, we then transfer to public safety. So we've tried to give ourselves a little bit of flexibility to transfer those funds, as opposed to them kind of being stuck in this general obligation bond fund for longer than they need to. Next, we have the Industrial and Downtown Loan Fund. The revenues in this particular fund would be interest and any loan repayments that we receive back. The expenditures in this fund is that the recommended budget provides for flexibility of $663,000 in new loans or grants. Those type of activities, both grants or loans, could be facade grants, industrial loans, job creation, relocation loans, also in partnership with the Illinois Valley Community Development Organization, IVCDO, working with them on small business development center loan programs. So that's the kind of activity that you would see here. This is the fund, for those you may remember. Some of these funds that were left over were used for business grants during the first several months of COVID. Fortunately, we got a lot of those funds back. I believe it's around $400,000. You'll see that in the FY20 actuals column where we got some of those funds back. So it was very fortunate that we were able to react quickly during that time of turmoil, and then fortunate enough to get those funds back to continue this loan and grant program. Next, we have the Community Development Block Grant Fund, which houses all of the revenues and expenditures associated with that entitlement grant funds. Now, you'll see the expenditures out of this particular fund are to carry out the consolidated plan. So all of those activities are reviewed and approved by council on multiple occasions. You will see the dollar amount goes down from in the 600s to into the 400s, and that's because during COVID we got an additional allotment, an additional tranche of COVID-related dollars through CDBG, but we should have all of that expended here within this next year. So we're not expecting as many funds in the coming year as we did in FY22. Let's see here. And I believe this is the last one, but it's the Environmental Waste Fees Fund, where we collect all of the environmental program fees, which are charged by the sanitation haulers and transfer stations. This fund essentially serves as a pass-through accounting mechanism because all of those revenues that we receive are then passed on to the Solid Waste Agency, where they use them to coordinate the cleanup of sites.
Any questions?
And with that, I can answer any questions.
Vanessa?
The budget document does state that the Community Development Block Grant has 2 new partners for the weatherization and the rehabilitation program. With that, do we anticipate more participation in those 2 programs? I know they've been pretty low.
I don't have the answer to that question. I'm not sure if Bradley is available with that information at this time.
Oh, I guess I'll let you off the hook, Adam. Yes, the answer is yes. Both 2 local nonprofits that we're working on, I think our 5th one right now, and we're looking forward to that continued partnership. That was a good an improvement this last year to be able to expend more of those CDBG monies that we hadn't to. But we're hoping that they will actually kind of almost be a community voice to kind of communicate to other nonprofits, contractors, that we have these rehab funds available. And so we're starting to see a little ripple effect there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on what was discussed today? Go ahead, Gordon.
On the water treatment plant, which is supposed to be started or done in '26, what are you projecting? How long is your bonds going to last? And then I guess the other question is there any great advantage to start paying now, or is there a window of when you can start and finish paying? And obviously you got to look at what rates are, all makes it complicated.
Yes to that last part. There's a lot of different balls that we're juggling on this one right now. We're looking into different grant opportunities. The other thing that's really affecting this is the inflation that we're seeing right now, and interest rates are really going up on debt. So we're going to be taking a long look at this. JC came at the right time. He's going to get his work cut out for him. I don't think we really want to start paying with the interest rates where they are today. So what we're really trying to leverage is multiple lower interest sources of money. The state has some money available at very low interest rates, as does potentially federal WIFIA funding, but they all have a little bit of strings with them. So we're working on all of those in addition to some significant grant applications, which would then lower that amount of indebtedness to reduce the debt service payments. But I don't think there is any advantage to start paying right now. We're just socking away money so that we have to borrow much less.
How long will the bond fund last?
So I think we were planning on a 25 to a 30-year issue.
And so let me add to your point about borrowing right now. There's actually rules against it, per se. In the 80s, people found out that they could borrow money and then reinvest that money at a higher interest rate. And the federal government found out about that and now taxes those things when you try and do them. So what we have to do is wait for the project to spend a significant amount, and there are rules and ORSs per percentages that we have to meet in a certain timeline to make sure we don't do that.
Okay, so do we have any general questions or information requests from the committee? Does anybody, go ahead, Josh.
Before we do any voting on this particular, are we going to vote on this?
We're going to vote on what we just talked about,
Yeah.
and then we're going to vote on the
on the general budget. So before we vote on this, I just want to declare a possible conflict of interest. I serve on the board of one of the recipients of the CBGD grant that was there. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Okay. No questions or information needed, so we need to vote on the budget of the programs we discussed tonight. So can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Brian. Second. Thank you, Valerie. Okay, so those in favor, please raise your hand. Lovely, it's unanimous. Okay, now, do we need to vote in the entire thing, or have we done it in four steps, Aaron?
No, I now have a closing presentation with
Okay.
regards to the vote for approval of the budget.
Okay.
So I'm going to be pulling that up here in just a second. All right, so I have a brief presentation to recap the recommended fiscal year 23 budget. So just as a reminder, there's four main phases. Is this up there? Yeah, it's up there. Oops. It's not sharing my screen here, but that's okay. So there's four main phases: to propose a budget by staff, then approve the budget, which is phased for tonight, adopting of the budget, which is for, I believe, June 15th, and then any changes throughout the process would happen at a council level throughout the year. So today we're at a point where on May 17th, you've heard from the Administration of Finance, and you will be hearing urban renewal later, but we're trying to conclude out the main city budget, and you've received the lands and buildings and capital and all the other departments and divisions. So there are two motions that really need to be taken a look at for this evening. One is to approve the budget, and then also one is to approve the taxes associated with the budget that would be levied. This is part of your phase 2. So the first one is to approve the total budget, which is on page 31, and a sample motion to approve the budget is in front of you.
So I'm looking for a motion to approve the entire budget. Josh?
So I actually, could we have a little discussion before we make
Sure.
that motion? Okay, perfect, thank you. I just want to say thank you so much to everybody. You guys have done an amazing job, and thank you for letting me pester everyone with a bunch of questions. So I just want to thank you. I guess the one thing that I'm a little hesitant about, or just it's more of a general kind of overarching thing, and that is, are we saving enough money? Are we because we are expanding in some places, we are doing some things that are really important, and I don't knock that. But I just fundamentally believe there are darker financial days headed toward governments, and you can kind of see it on the horizon. And the other piece that's a huge piece is we all kind of as a community got bailed out by ARPA dollars and by other federal dollars during COVID. They are not coming. Like those rain clouds were kept at bay, but quite frankly, they're coming, and we need to be ready with an umbrella. And I think one of the things that would just press the council and urge the council to do is try to find every possible place where you could possibly make some savings and some reductions, and try to get that ending fund balance as high as possible, maybe closer to that 40% side than that 30% side, because I can kind of see the writing on the wall, and I think the more prepared we are, the better we'll be off. And a lot of credit to this council, to previous councils, for really keeping things in place to be able to adapt to it. But that's my hesitance and my just kind of general comment.
Thank you. Rick?
So in that vein, and not saying we want to go there, but for instance, the 2 positions in the Parks Department for FTEs, if we were to go to a contract and hire temporary help for a year or 2 years contract, would there be a substantial financial advantage by doing that? Or would it be a wash? In other words, if that would be one area, and I don't know how much the savings may be so minuscule, it's actually more complicated or actually more of a nuisance. Do you have a perspective on that?
If you're looking at level of service when it comes to either a contract or internal, we believe from an internal perspective, the quality, the service and the quality will be there. If you have a specific for a contract, I think that would be something we could take a look at. One of the things we also have to consider is labor laws, and there is some requirements to where you can't hire full-time employees under a contract and keep them going. You'd have to take a look at that, because that's technically a full-time employee that you're considering. So there's a number of questions that I think would follow that one question, and answers that I don't have for you this evening. But the question would be level of service, whether it's internal or external. If the level of service that was appropriate for council, we could look at an external contract in some form or fashion potentially, but the resources would need to be there if you want the service to be there.
Thank you.
Valerie?
Yeah, I haven't been here for the last 2 times, but I have listened to them, and I do know there was concerns, from Brian and Vanessa, because we did go through the crunching of numbers of 1.8 million over this last year, and that was a very painful process, and we don't want to go there again. I will also say that I have seen the drop in the level of service, and I have felt that drop in the level of service, and I like the idea that we could bring it back up. And so I'm going to assume that part of the reason that we can was because we were able to, we took a very conservative or grand look at what we needed to get rid of to make sure that we didn't have to keep coming back for more drops. My biggest concern has been that we've had a lot of holes in our staffing in this last year or two, and that's just, everybody has holes in their staffing right now, and it's been really difficult to hire people. And it seems like we are coming up to par. We have hired some big holes, and I'm really looking forward to going there, but I want to make sure that we don't go forward 10 steps and then have to drop down 7. So I just want the assuredness, because obviously the contingency fund, I think it is at 38, is that where it's at right now, which makes me feel good that we've been able to get to this point and still feel that we can keep that contingency high. So I guess I'm just looking for reassurance that we have budgeted for a full staffing at where they're, like, that's why I asked about the information coordinator, because I still feel that that's a hole that needs to be filled. So I just want to make sure that that has been considered. We are budgeted. This is budgeting for a full staffing level, and that based on this, and I trust you, I trust Adam, that we will come back at the end within that contingency parameter.
So I'll take the first response. Adam can maybe follow up if he wants, but yeah, we have adding general fund FTEs is not something we take lightly, along with, I think, council wanting to increase the level of service associated with parks and safety in the community. And so looking at whether or not the general fund can support that, we have had some underspending. Council did do a great job of identifying some funds to cut, representing about $1.8 million. We had a good year of revenue, so a number of those things added together created an opportunity for us to have still a solid contingency ending fund balance for the general fund within the parameters of the 30 to 40%. And projecting out through the rest of the levy term, we still believe that we will be in those parameters of the 30 to 40%, which is a healthy parameter for the city. Saying that, there is the caveat, though, that adding additional general fund expenses, whether it be through a contract or whether it be through an FTE, does draw down and provide some additional drawdown on that general fund. And also recognizing the number one goal out of Council's strategic plan was to come up with funding, permanent, stable, for public safety services in general is a top priority. That would need to, and it would be recommended that would need to continue to be a top goal. So there is that work that still needs to be done, recognizing the level of service that's desired. We can provide that level of service now through the current levy term, which is a positive because we have good financial planning. Whether we have those in the 3 in FTE or not in the general fund, we will still have a drawdown of the general fund will still be within parameters. It'll be a little less with those 3. There's still going to be a need for us to look at additional funding if we're going to maintain the same level of service that we have today, or even what's in the fiscal year 23 budget. So that challenge still exists at the end of this levy term.
All right, and I'm very aware of that, but I just wanted to make sure that that was factored in when you added those employees. But I totally agree that they need to be there because, as I said, I've seen the morale, I've seen a lot of issues come about as a result of those positions not being there, and more than ever, I understand that level of service conversation.
Brian.
Thank you for all the great budget presentations. I know that staff has put a ton of work into this, just like they do every year, and the budget looks great. the concern for me revolves around the general fund and making sure that it stays healthy into the future. We're drawing it down this year with this budget from 38% to 35% with an increase in operational expenses, not one-time expenses. So that drawdown will continue at a higher rate because of the 3 new FTE. So we're just kind of digging a deeper hole for ourselves at the end of the levy period than maybe we need to. And we're kind of in between a rock and a hard place because, as Valerie said, you know, there's a level of service concern. But from the other side, there's a budgetary concern. And with my budget committee hat on, you know, I can't, you know, looking forward into the future, it's going to be very difficult for me to be okay with drawing down with operational expenses like that.
Go ahead. Vanessa. I'm sorry, you're both there. Vanessa, ladies first.
Yeah, I don't want to duplicate too much of what has been said already, but I will be voting no this evening on the motion to approve the whole budget for reasons stated in the police and community development budget. In 2021, when we did conduct the $1.8 million in budget cuts, I was really proud that the council was able to conduct those budget cuts without eliminating any existing employees. And I have no confirmation that when the bill comes due, because the expenditures and revenues do not line up, when the bill comes due and that process has to be done again, I'm not confident that we won't have to actually cut employed individuals with the organization. So I will be voting no.
Tripp?
So this is just a procedural question more than anything else. On a couple of occasions, we've mentioned the need for supplemental budgets as we move through the fiscal year. I think most notably for fuel expenses. Is this committee going to reconvene to approve those supplemental budgets?
Well, the city council can convene and do the supplemental budgets.
Go ahead, Josh.
Just one other thing that I forgot to kind of mention too, and kind of looking at the financial impacts and kind of looking forward and echoing what Brian talked about, or Councilor Daylight LaGrange, is inflation. It's a real issue. Fuel costs, wage increases, these types of things are really driving, and I don't see that necessarily slowing down. And I think one other thing that we should be really taking a look at is were the budget as they were developed really capturing all of those real high increases. I think you guys did a really good job of kind of guessing, but I don't think anybody thought Russia was going to invade the Ukraine, or that we would be looking at literally the highest inflation rate since the basically Jimmy Carter days. So like we need to, I do think that there also needs to be a lot of thought around that, and I think getting ready for those adjustments and maximum flexibility is going to be key.
Yeah, that's well said. It was difficult this year because of all the external drivers that have made an impact, that a multiplying factor above and beyond. There's always external drivers, but this year it was greater. And both from a revenue and expenditure perspective, it was difficult. So what we tried to do is look at some of the expenditures and maybe over guesstimate, but you know, with fuel and stuff, it's even gone up even more. So that's a great example of, did we do enough? But we did look at doing that. We also tried to be relatively conservative in the revenues coming in, so that doesn't hurt us also. So, but it was difficult with all those external drivers this year.
Other comments? Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments that everyone's made, and I really appreciate the help that the budget committee, the lay people, actually the lay members, helped the city council with this process. You know, from the perspective of being on the budget committee, which is I guess what I am tonight, to me this is I guess a viable and potentially reasonable balanced budget. You know, I would quite frankly, once we likely approve this tonight and we adjourn, the next time I look at it, I'll be looking at it as a city councilor. And that's actually, I'm just going to tell people I'll be looking at it from a different light. Because last year, for instance, the budget committee wouldn't know, but you had no way of knowing. I mean, last year, the council got emails, attack on social media, et cetera, for defunding the police when we went through our $1.8 million budget cutting exercise. So the reality is different once we leave the budget committee room, where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So while I'm okay with approving this tonight, and I'll be voting yes on it, that doesn't mean that as a counselor, I'm going to be blindly implementing this as presented without a lot more further thought. Because for the reasons that many people have stated, we've got a lot of other things to potentially consider, and that's what the City Council has to do. But I appreciate the help from the Budget Committee, and I'll be voting yes.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say that I move that the Budget Committee of the City of Grants Pass approve the budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023, as amended in the amount of $192,571,808, with the additional amendment of excluding the additional 3 FTE as proposed.
Can we get a second for that? Got a second from Tammy?
I second that.
Okay, discussion on the motion.
I want clarification.
You want what?
I want clarification of exactly. So so basically what he's saying is he's doing the motion, but he's taking out the 2 Parks Committee and the extra police officer. So I'm just getting clarification on the motion.
He's doing a different
yes.
motion.
Okay. I just wanted clarification.
So is there discussion on it? Go ahead, Valerie.
Well, I'm just going to say, I mean, I'm a city council person as well, but I have truly seen the impact of the loss of those 2 parks people and the police. I have seen the impact in the morale of the departments. I have seen the effect on our community. So I will be voting no on that motion because I do think it's important that we move forward with those FTEs.
Okay, more discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Rick.
I will also be voting against the motion because I believe we need those parks positions and the police position as well. The thing I'm comfortable with are the contingencies. If the contingencies were not there, I would be really concerned. And I realize nobody can predict the future, and right now the roadmap looks pretty bumpy. And when this gets to the City Council, we still have the opportunity that night to make amendments and in the future. So I'm comfortable with the process we have at hand. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tammy.
I seconded the motion because I too had concerns about the public safety night's budget, particularly with the levy coming up with not, having an extension on that, and your fiscal responsibility to make sure that you can provide funding for future years. So that was why I seconded that motion.
Go ahead, Josh.
I'm going to vote in favor of this motion, and my thought process here is, as somebody who's gone through a lot of legislative processes, it's always easier to add back than to take away. And I think if anything, it puts the City Council in a place where they can really find the places to be able to find that money to make this sustainable, as opposed to trying to say, man, we really have to save money and now we're going to make cuts. So that is really like my thought process. I do agree that these are incredibly important and they're essential for the services, but I think the decision-making process will actually be furthered, and it will really help that long-term sustainability, which is what I believe is vitally important for this budget committee to do.
Other discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on it, and we'll do it with go ahead and individually pro or con, but let's go individually. Yes.
Sorry, do I have to declare a potential conflict, or am I clear once I declared that once? I've declared it. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
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 No.
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 Yes.
Sorry, buddy, no. No.
No.
No.
Yes.
Do you have numbers, Karen?
It was,
I,
it was 5 to 10.
yeah, I have a little question that it went down, but,
Yeah, I had 5 to 9.
5 to 9.
okay. So
Is
the
there
motion's defeated. Okay. Would someone like to make another motion? Valerie?
Oops. I move that the Budget Committee of the City of Grants Pass approve the budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023, as amended in the amount of $192,571,808.
Okay. A second by Rick. Discussion on this motion? No discussion. Okay, let's vote in the same manner individually.
No.
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 Yes.
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 Wait a minute, what,
Yes.
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 No.
that's, do you have a number?
I did.
Four no.
What did you vote, no,
There were
Gordon?
5 no's.
5 no's? I didn't hear Gordon. Okay.
So I think it passed 10 to 5, did it not?
You are correct. 9 to 5.
9 to 5.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, 9 to 5, 9 to 5 is enough to approve the budget, which it was. Now, we need to approve a tax levy for public safety. So can we get a motion?
The
Wait,
motion is in
just a
front of you.
second.
It's for approving both. This motion here is, there's 2 parts. One, you have to approve the budget,
Okay.
and then you also have to approve the taxes levied. And so we levy 2 taxes. We have a permanent property tax rate of $4.13, and then we also have a levy in the amount of $1.79. So the motion would need to include both of those.
Josh?
Mr. Chair, I move that the Budget Committee of the City of Grants Pass approve property taxes for the fiscal year ending in June 30, 2023 at the rate of $4.13 and per assessed thousand of assessed value for the permanent rate tax levy, and in the amount of $1.79 for the public safety operating levy.
Can I get a second for that? Valerie? Okay, discussion on that motion.
Question.
Sorry? Go ahead.
Just a point of order. Was the $4.13 adequate to collect the additional 35 10,000s? Because, I mean, multiply that against $1 billion in real market value. That's going to be a large number.
Yeah.
If we don't get it right.
Technically, a 4.1335 per thousand. If the
A rate
motion
of
can be
4.1335 per assessed thousand.
And the seconder, yeah, thank you. Okay. 4 point something, yeah. Can we get well, discussion on it, or can we get a motion to approve? I mean, no, pardon me, can we get a vote? Go ahead.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
That's approved.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank the council members, the citizens, staff, budget committee for making this budget successful and providing the guidance and direction. Finance has been amazing, department directors and all the staff to put this together. It took a lot of time, a lot of work this year, a lot of extra work, and so greatly appreciate that. I also would like to provide a special thanks to Adam. This is his official last day, and Adam, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation for you choosing the City of Grants Pass. You have been a valued member of our team, and your input has contributed to our success. Your work ethic, innovative ideas, positivity, and your mad spreadsheet skills, and most of all, blending it all together with a great sense of humor, it truly does make you one of a kind, and we are blessed to have been able to share our time and our experiences together with you. The true value, though, of you choosing Grants Pass is not in what we accomplished. It's in a personal gain that comes from knowing you and sharing our experience and helping to build community. We know that wherever life takes you, success will follow. We look forward to hearing about your future expeditions and your achievements. And I want to thank you once again for all you've done for the City of Grants Pass and our organization. Adam, thank you.
Woohoo.
Okay, can we get a vote to adjourn? And then, and then we can, Vanessa.
I move to adjourn the Budget Committee meeting and convene the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee meeting.
And there's a second down there by Jason. Okay. So in favor? That's good. Okay. So you're on again, Aaron.
All right. Good evening, Urban Renewal Agency Board, and welcome to the recommended fiscal year 23 budget. What I'd like to do today is provide you with the budget message, brief budget summary, capital projects review, and then ultimately move towards approving the budget for the Urban Renewal Agency.
Nominate a chair and vice chair.
And before I do that, we need to nominate a chair and a vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Tom Brandis as chair. All in favor?
I'm not running, you are right now.
Okay, so all in favor?
Yes.
Okay.
It's unanimous, okay.
Thank
so
you.
there you go, now you're chair.
Now I can. Now, can we get nominations for vice chair?
I'd like to
Valerie?
nominate Tom Branthier as our vice chair.
Second by Rick. Other nominations? Those in favor? Quick, good. Now.
All right, here we go. Let's start off with the budget message. So for financial reporting purposes, the agency is a component of the city, but for budget purposes, it is independent from the city, and that's why we had to adjourn as a city budget committee and adjourn as the Urban Renewal Agency Board. So City Council throughout the year acts as the board of the agency, and the City Budget Committee acts in a similar role as you just did for the city budget, but you're doing so for the Urban Renewal Agency. Same process occurs and same rules apply to the Urban Renewal Agency as so with the city budget when it comes to Oregon revised statutes. So for a strategic planning perspective, the Urban Renewal Agency was in place to help encourage economic opportunity, facilitate sustainable management growth, maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure to meet community needs. Here on the screen is the boundaries of the Urban Renewal Agency, which represents about 18% of the city. It's shown in highlighted in yellow. It really encompasses the majority of the business park and industrial zone property, along with the commercial properties up and down the corridor of the highways, 6th and 7th Street, and 199, et cetera. It also does incorporate some shouldering residential properties also on the sides. So for fiscal year 23, this is actually the 6th year of it receiving taxes. So it's been in existence for 6 years. It's no longer a toddler, it's no longer an infant, it's now a toddler. So it's up and moving around, and it's got some flexibility. Revenues are applied to eligible projects based on city council prioritization, and there is a plan associated with the Urban Renewal Agency, which I'll highlight later. Full list of projects is in your book on Appendix A on page 5 through 7 of your handout. What is urban renewal? Why do we have an urban renewal agency? It's a program to improve specific areas that are poorly developed or underdeveloped, which is considered blight. So that's the legal term that's utilized in Oregon Revised Statute. It's there to identify and improve blighted areas. It has been authorized from the federal government down to the state of Oregon. It provides a financial mechanism to implement city plans when it comes to the use of tax increment financing. As mentioned, it usually covers poor building conditions, underdeveloped or underutilized properties, and inadequate city infrastructure, and has been utilized as a tool for those purposes. So in an area that's designated an urban rural area, there are assessed values of properties, which we sort of talked about through the budget process. When an urban rural agency comes into existence, those property taxes are frozen. So that 18% in that highlighted area that you saw on the map, 6 years ago, the tax base was frozen from a standpoint of all the taxing districts. This is what you're going to get for the next 25 to 30 years. Is what you got 6 years ago. That will be a given. You're going to get that. Any increases each year that occurs within that district goes to the Urban Renewal Agency, and that's the tax increment financing, and that's sort of how it works. So you have year one, which was 6 years ago, and we are there where we are now. You've got the frozen base that lasts throughout the length of the taxing district, and the income, the additional increases each year goes strictly to the Urban Renewal Agency to utilize for Urban Renewal Agency projects. The concept is if you take those dedicated funds, re-inject them into that area, the ultimate tax base is going to rise in growth and strength over the years, more so than if you would have included it, more so than if you would have left it alone and not had an urban renewal agency. So you're increasing the tax base by increasing property values by doing the projects as defined by council in the strategic plan. Once it's served its purpose, its useful life, somewhere around 25 to 30 years, then the tax increment financing goes away, and all the taxes now go and are shared with all the taxing districts. So what taxing districts are we talking about that have been affected by the Urban Rural Agency? Are shown here. There are some schools. There's the library district, 4-H extension, and also the county and the city. The positive about the schools, though, and that's always something of interest, is does that mean the school's tax base is frozen and they don't get any additional revenue over the term of the Urban Renewal Agency? Well, the positive is the schools are set up, and that was changed a number of years ago, or a decade ago, where the schools are basically paid on a per capita and not on a tax rate base. And so it used to be local control from a financial perspective, but now it's gone and distributed through the state. So urban renewal agencies do not affect the revenues that schools receive. So sort of the key to the urban renewal agency is to incentivize private investment. And how do you incentivize private investment? You take a blighted area that's in the urban renewal agency, say an undeveloped piece of property that has a couple of older structures on it that are no longer useful, and that urban renewal agency could come in and level the property. It could take care of any public infrastructure that's needed. Oh, it needed water and sewer also. Well, we'll put that in. It needed some cleanup. We'll clean up the property. And it takes a property that was encumbered by whatever it may have been encumbered by, clears the encumbrances, adds value to the property, and then a developer it makes more sense for the developer to come in and actually develop it for whatever use according to the programs that have been identified in the Urban Renewal Agency. There's so many different projects when you look around the nation of how urban renewal has been utilized, from streets and utilities, streetscape. It catalyzes development, storefront loans, parks and plazas. These are just pictures of a few of them, from Tom Pierce Park in Portland to the Barcadero area in San Francisco to just a little walking area in Washington, D.C. All of those things provide value to the community and then ultimately increases the tax base. So here's the map again with the specific numbers when it comes to the Urban Renewal Agency. Our Urban Renewal Agency is at 18.32% of the area for Grants Pass. Here on the screen is the list of approved programs that are in the strategic plan. And they also have identified numbers associated with that. And it's already gone through a couple of changes through its time already in 6 years. And some of those are shown here in the change category, where, say, for instance, one of the bigger ones was a convention center. When the Urban Renewal Agency was first established 6 years ago, there was a lot of talk about a convention center and the use of maybe urban renewal dollars. But now things have changed, and the good thing about urban renewal is it has the ability to make those changes. So council serving as an Urban Renewal Agency board can make those changes throughout the year. One of the changes they did make was to reduce that convention center line item from 18 to 7, and then provided the $11 million and spread that across a couple of new categories, including housing development and swimming pool. Here on page 4 of the Urban Renewal Agency budget, you'll see a spreadsheet that you'll see on the screen. One of the key highlights to this is we're looking at a recommended budget of $3.6 million, coming in this year of $1.4 million with a beginning balance of $2.25 million. Looking at the requirements, the key and the big number here is capital outlay at $3.556 million. What we're providing here is maximum flexibility for council serving as an Urban Renewal Agency board to spend the dollars. So it's budgeted to take the majority of the resources of the Urban Renewal Agency, put it into capital outlay. That provides, with that allocation, that provides council the flexibility to utilize that money for these type of projects. We're not identifying a specific project like, okay, we're gonna put $2 million into building rehab and we're gonna put $1 million into 6th and 7th Street. We're looking at, if we're looking at in the budget, we've got budgeted $3.5 million to go to capital outlay to provide the flexibility for council. The thing is with urban renewal is, urban renewal is there to incentivize private investment. And there are times when you are waiting for a developer to come in and share interest in something, and then you can incentivize that developer. Sometimes cities take the lead role and incentivize by, say, buying property and doing something. And so there needs to be some flexibility, and this provides the ultimate flexibility for council in the future. I'm going to stop there because I'm seeing multiple hands come up.
Brian. Oh, I'm sorry, Tammy.
Sorry. So I'm seeing an ending fund balance of like $10,000, giving you that flexibility. However, are there any restrictions with percentages like in the city budget?
No. There's the funding requirements like we have from a contingency standpoint, et cetera. No, this budget has more flexibility, and that's why we have the $3.5 million in capital outlay.
Josh?
So the flexibility is to fund things that are listed in this I guess slide 15. So that is the list of the things that you could kind of look at, or could you go even outside of that, or would you need city council approval before you did that?
Okay, so yeah, great question. These items here are basically the plan for use of the dollars. Doesn't mean that if you were to go outside of that, it would need to, the plan would need to be modified. But there is some flexibility, like there was a few years ago, we changed it.
Tom?
The total of those projects is $50,979,000. The current revenue for the Urban Renewal Agency is about 1.5 million. So this 50 would be over many years?
Yes.
20?
26 to 30 years, 25 to 30 years, yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's the life of the Urban Renewal.
That's the life of the
Agency.
Urban Renewal Agency. And you'll see here in this slide where in 2020, the actual was $910,000. In 2021, it was just over $1 million. We're projecting in 23 that we're going to be getting 1.46. So that slowly rises.
Rick?
So Aaron, and back on slide 15, if a member of the public owns a piece of property that's blighted and does not have urban services and they're lacking sidewalks and so forth, the city standards, do they have to come in and petition to the city council to get on this list? Or can they just present an application? And how would that proceed?
So if a citizen or property owner was wanting public infrastructure in front of them, we have a program that's separate from this. This is to spark private investment for blighted areas. And if, say, for instance, public infrastructure like curb gutter sidewalk was part of a developer coming in and wanting to do mixed use, housing, employment land, then yes, there are a number of items under here where we'd be able to help them. If it was a residential person, someone that owns a home, and they just wanted their sidewalk done, this is not the program for them, but we do have other programs associated with public works that could maybe assist in that process.
So if there are commercial people out there that want to come in with a certain proposal because it is a blighted area, they can fit under one of those categories, how do they get their proposal before us?
It sounds like what you're talking about is more, you're maybe speaking of smaller individual, already pre-existing, that's just wanting some public infrastructure established or improvements to their building. We have grants already established in a number of different grants that utilize some urban renewal dollars. BRAG is one of the programs that utilizes urban renewal, so we would funnel them through some of our current and existing grant programs to provide assistance to their buildings themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Brian?
Could you, you are on slide 15. I just wanted to clarify Tom's point with that 50 million. That number, if I'm understanding correctly, does not include the 36% for the water capital projects, so that 50 million with those two is really much higher. Is that correct?
I think it's more like 80 million if I remember the number correctly, but Adam might be able to tell me.
I don't remember the total over the 50 million off the top of my head, but that's one of the reasons that this year we're looking at actually applying a number and some figures to the sewer plant and the water plant alone, those two activities you see there at the top.
Sure, yeah, thank you. I don't need the exact numbers. I just wanted to be clear that that is not the total at the bottom. And then I had a question on, I guess, slide 17.
I don't have the numbers on the slides. For some reason, this isn't working right, so.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
It's in another place too, but the far right column, it shows the revenue by year.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing it's pretty consistent, except for between 22 and 23, it looks like it's like really small. So I would think that for this agency, the revenue would be very consistent from year to year.
So one of the keys is this 22 is an estimate. The other two are actuals. 20 and 21 are actuals. 22 is an estimate, and 23 is an estimate. So it's tough to get that close.
I see. Do we have any indication as far as our 22 estimate, if that's close, or we don't have that data yet?
Yeah, that number is derived from the updated figures from the county assessor's office. And so it's really the 2023 and 2024 numbers that We have to be a little more creative with the numbers that we use. We do definitely take into account the permits, the development permits within the urban renewal area, and try to use that to come up with a reasonable estimate of how much we think that the assessed value could increase specifically within the urban renewal area. We do the same with the city's property taxes as well. However, based on the timing of development, that can be a little bit off. So we're making the best estimate with the available data that we have.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tammy.
Can you tell me who has authority to approve the $3 million in expenditures?
That would be City Council serving as the Urban Renewal Agency Board.
Tom?
The Urban Renewal Agency has its own bonding authority, is that right?
Yes.
How are the limits on that established? Is it based on that total of 80 million somehow? Is the TIF revenue the basis for determining how much could be floated?
Yes.
Okay.
If Adam or JC want to do more than that, but that's sort of how it's like a surety bond from a standpoint, or a general obligation bond, or something from the city. They look at your revenues coming in and what your taxes are that you're receiving and the history of those taxes.
Does that require voter approval? No.
No, yeah, that's the Urban Renewal Agency's authority to do that.
Thank you.
Gordon?
With about $1.5 million, looks like it's coming your way every year, won't the water treatment plant suck this up for the next 30 years?
Adam, you want to address that question? It's a great question, and our sort of discussion that we've had with City Council.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, and Jason talked about it earlier, we're dealing with a lot of variables related to this water plant, from inflation to the external funding with federal agencies like WIFIA or the state, as well as some other grant opportunities that could very significantly impact the total amount that we actually borrow. And so the Urban Renewal Agency can contribute 18% of the debt service, of which we really don't know what that is quite yet. So if we're fortunate and we do receive the large amount of funding that we've applied for, then the total debt service for the water treatment plant could go down significantly. Of course, there are also other factors that could mean that we have to adjust our estimates on the total cost and borrow more. There's just a lot of variables involved with what that final number will be. So another way to look at this could also be that the Urban Renewal Agency has not even begun to contribute to that amount, and the Urban Renewal Agency only has another 25 possible years left to make that contribution. So right now, one of the items in this recommended budget, which would be affirmed later in the year by the Urban Renewal Agency Board, is contributing that one-time large upfront amount to help reduce the debt service. That's about as much, it's slightly more, but it's about as much as the Urban Renewal Agency could have contributed over the last 5 years if it had started contributing immediately. So we're doing a little bit of catch-up right now, but of course, as soon as we get some solid numbers on what that 18% of total debt service is, then we'll, if council certainly approves that final transfer, then we'll adjust our schedule of contributions at that time. So this year, it does seem like a large portion, but the more you contribute up front, it would actually reduce the annual contribution that the Urban Renewal Agency would be making going forward. So there's certainly more to consider there, but right now, the budget as recommended provides the flexibility to make that one-time upfront contribution or not. It could certainly adjust its priorities and invest those funds in other kinds of capital outlay.
Brian.
I just had a quick clarification about the 18%. My previous understanding was that those two line items could only be 18% because the agency only covers 18% of the city. So I'm wanting clarification if it's 18% of the cost of the project or 18% of the revenues of the agency over its life?
It's 18% of the total debt service for the water treatment plant and for the wastewater plant.
So in theory, it could be much higher than 18% of the agency.
You mean depending on the total? It would all depend on the total amount of debt that is actually issued, and that is absolutely the largest variable that we're dealing with right now.
Okay.
Josh?
It's more of an academic question, but when you go back to slide 15, are those, I mean, I figure you could absolutely spend even more than that. Are those just kind of the caps that you guys have put in, that's how much you see appropriate to go into those type of funding sources?
Yeah, one of the requirements of having urban renewal agencies, you have to have a defined plan of where you might be spending the money, and then you do a good faith estimate on what you think you might be spending on. So although I believe those numbers you can think of as general guidelines. If all of a sudden something came in hot and there was so much development on the north end of town that it just skyrocketed, we could change some of those numbers and take the $4 million, and the thing you can't do is you can't be adding new value to it.
Tom?
I think Gordon's question is really an important one, and I appreciate, Adam, the uncertainty about the future and the uncertainty about the total cost of the plant. But in a worst case scenario, the bond would probably be about $65 million. And if it's around 65, then at 4% for 25 years, that's a $4 million annual debt service. 18% of that would be 740 every year for 25 years. And for the wastewater debt service that is also going to get 18%, that amounts to 222,000. So the two of those together is close to $1 million a year. That's an estimate. It's a ballpark. There probably will be changes. I really appreciate, Adam, that there are so many variables that it's very difficult to make that kind of a projection. However, the worst case is that there won't be grants and that the bond will have to be substantial.
Absolutely. And the slide that Aaron has up right now, you can see the $3.5 million contribution in FY23. And then you see in projected FY24, that contribution amount goes down to $378,000. So it's kind of using the available funds, or this particular strategy uses the currently available funds to help buy down debt, which would reduce the overall debt that is issued for the water treatment plant, which would save the ratepayers in the long term on its debt service. It would also reduce the total obligation that the Urban Renewal Agency has to the water treatment plants, because if you reduce the total debt, 18% of the total debt is also reduced. So you can see this large upfront contribution provides the URA with more flexibility in future years to contribute to other projects, as well as reducing the overall obligation for this particular line item.
Rick?
Oh, go ahead, Rick.
So Aaron, another side of the coin would be if we choose to take the $3.5 million and put it in the water treatment plant, that is not taxable income to the city because the city owns the plant. And the main focus on an urban renewal agency is to increase the tax base so you have more revenue to cover your operations. So do we have, when you weigh $3.5 million to reduce the tax burden on the citizen, how much is the other side to create revenue to reduce the tax burden on the citizen as well?
Well, it's a good statement and question. So it benefits both, and it all depends on your investment from a standpoint of the private sector and what ultimately will be developed. I can say that in the spirit of creating the Urban Renewal Agency 6 years ago, council, one of the key things council wanted to do was buy down the debt of the water and wastewater plant, and they saw the Urban Renewal Agency as a financial tool, and that's why it's there at that 18%. So the whole community, although it's not going to gain in tax value, the whole community is benefiting with reduced rates, both commercial, industrial, residential. And then the rest of the money is, or a large portion of the rest of the Urban Renewal Agency over time will be hopefully investing in incentivizing private investment, which will increase the tax.
And the purpose of my question is looking at public safety, police and fire needing revenue, and I see the increased tax base creates that revenue. And if we hold that back because we've diverted it to the water treatment plant, you know, how does that balance out? And I don't have, no, we can't answer that tonight, but.
Well, ultimately, long-term, public safety in all general fund operations, parks, community development, recreation, will benefit at the end of the Urban Renewal Agency when the tax increment financing goes away and those values and properties have gone up because of the investments, the public investments to incentivize private investment.
Tripp.
Well, kind of to Rick's point, though, it's also important to remember that 60% of the increment's coming from taxing districts other than the city. So if you go 18% of 60%, you know, that's money from the school districts, or, you know, more like state income taxes, and the county 4-H, et cetera, going to the water treatment plant. So yes, we're putting pressure on the general fund from not having that increment available to it right now. But at the same time, if we were to take that pressure off by abandoning the increment, we're not getting that money from the other districts to pay for the treatment plant. I guess my question was going to be, where's the debt service? Because my understanding of TIFs are generally municipalities borrow a whole big load of money up front to put all the infrastructure in the dirt and then see the benefit, and yet we're not seeing any debt services in this budget. And then kind of as an addendum to that, I mean, how much of the postponement of those big bond issues is being driven by needing to wait to see what the water treatment plant is going to cost?
So there's no big bond issues right now for Urban Renewal Agency because we haven't identified a large project that would require those. But once and if a project does occur like that, then we may need to look at that depending on what we have in capital outlay available to help spur that. If it's a big enough project like some of the ones I showed on the picture, it would require some bonding and for us to upfront pay a large sum.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking through the second order consequences of if we were to float, you know, $25 million worth of infrastructure other than the water treatment plant, the sewer treatment plant, through the TIF. Great, we have a TIF to pay for that infrastructure, but you know, 3 years when the water treatment plant is finally built, we finally know how much there is. There might not be room in the Urban Renewal Agency budget to contribute the 18% we'd like to contribute to that fund because we paid for a whole bunch of other priorities first. And does that seem like a reasonable characterization of the situation we're in right now?
Aaron, could I?
Yeah.
So two items. One is we've already taken out all the debt on the wastewater side, so we can start making those payments today, as Adam had talked about. And I don't think we're proposing to go install a lot of infrastructure right now. We really are trying to finalize what the actual debt service will be on the water plant. I believe Adam's theory here is by making a payment in lieu of that 18% debt service, we're actually buying down that debt ahead of time, so the overall obligation will be lower. The rest of the funds that were identified in specific projects, those can only pay for up to 25% of that improved infrastructure per the way that the plan is laid out. And so we would stage those. And then for larger projects, the city would, I would imagine, take out the debt through the agency, but not They wouldn't be taking out debt for water and wastewater, like for the water plant. That would happen separately. I think that that gets a little closer to your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's just,
Okay.
if we, like, there are a lot of meritorious projects on that list. And
Yeah.
you can imagine in this early part of the TIF, like, okay, let's go spend $25 million on a lot of stuff worth spending money on.
Yeah.
And we borrowed to do that now. You know, it could be 7 years into the life cycle of the water treatment plant before we're actually using the TIF as it seems to be intended, which is to move money out of other taxing districts into the water treatment plant.
Tom?
I just want to make a couple of points about the value of the Urban Renewal Agency. It's such a powerful economic development tool. And the $3.5 million has taken 5 years to build. And by using it this way, it essentially takes all of the reserves of the Urban Renewal Agency. And so many of the meritorious projects are not going to be able to be initiated if that $3.5 million is transferred. And you know, there's a lot of things happening right now that suggest that $3.5 million might create real benefit for the community. We have a downtown revitalization task force that is likely to come up with some pretty significant recommendations about urban renewal in Grants Pass. And we are also hiring 2 new economic development professionals. And having a reserve of $3.5 million in the Urban Renewal Agency could be a very powerful addition to the toolkit available to the new staff. So there's time between now and when the first $20 million tranche is going to be issued. I think that's 2025. So there isn't really urgency to appropriate the $3.5 million to the water fund yet. Perhaps it should be held in the Urban Renewal Agency so that the Urban Renewal Board Council has the flexibility that you're referring to, either to transfer it to the water fund or to make use of it for urban renewal.
So I'd like to address that. So tonight's budget is provides that flexibility for council. This is just a direction that council discussed as where they were going to go. It will take council action serving as an urban renewal agency board to transfer those funds into debt services for water and wastewater. Or it would take council action to transfer those funds to an urban renewal project that would partner with some private kind of private sector program. The key is that I think is important as a takeaway with what we're looking at allocating is we've made a budget that provides with council with the most flexibility for the urban renewal agency by providing it in capital outlay. The council in the future will have the ability to do what they desire with the ultimate resources of the agency.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I really appreciate that response. But what we're looking at here is adopted fiscal 23 budget shows $3.5 million to the water treatment plant. So that's not what we're acting on?
No, you're acting on the actual, I don't know if I've got the spreadsheet in here.
Slide 16.
Yeah, this is what you're acting on.
Okay. Thank you.
Tammy?
Can you clarify, you said that it's 18% of the debt service. There is no debt service at the moment. So how are you coming up with putting $3.5 million towards it?
It's basic 18% of the debt service and what we anticipate the project cost is going to be, and we have a decent number associated with that. And the whole concept about starting early is just that if you start early, the payments throughout the life of the renewal agency will be smaller. So in year 15 and year 20, there's going to be less that is going to have to go to the debt services because you made more of an upfront cost in the beginning.
So you can put them to future debt services? or projected debt services?
Yeah, it's a total amount, not necessarily the annual debt service amount that would be incurred. And so if you look at generically as far as a simplistic calculation, $50 million debt service, 18% of that is $9 million.
Aaron, after the small interlude, go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. I think we've addressed a number of these issues. There are many other urban renewal projects that were competing for the limited resources. We basically had the discussion on what was on that slide, and we talked about some other examples. And ultimately, it could be that there's the good faith that council may say, yeah, we want to continue to do the debt service, but 3 months from now, there could be a developer comes in and says, oh my gosh, I've got the project, and we could have the flexibility with this budget being approved to provide council the ability to move those dollars to where they see fit. Just to recap, the Urban Renewal Agency will be an effective tool for economic development, removal of blight, creating economic opportunities, and increasing the value to our community, and ultimately quality of life and accomplishing council goals. And with that, I have any other questions?
Brian?
Thanks, Aaron. So just to be super duper clear, approving the budget does not necessarily mean that those funds are allocated. It's going to take additional council action after the budget is approved to allocate that.
That is correct. The one thing that was mentioned about the debt services, that's like a narrative that you have in all the LB projects. There's a narrative that says in general this is what it's for. Doesn't mean that that's the specific thing, but it provides a narrative on a possibility. Council did discuss this and provided direction that they would be interested in doing this, so we put that in the narrative.
Okay, great. And then the other capital outlay of $56,500, I think I know what that is, but what is that?
Let's see.
Yeah, it's on that slide.
Councilor De La Grange, I'd say that's very much like our capital projects in that we go ahead and appropriate the total available funds to give council maximum flexibility to adjust to changing priorities as they arise. So that's not a specific, we know that something is going to cost $56,500. That's just, we could put it in contingency or ending fund balance and make it easier for the URA board to spend, or we can go ahead and appropriate it.
Okay, so that is not the amount for the new economic development manager, part of that position? Because I think it wasn't part of that going to be funded out of urban renewal?
Yes.
Is that this amount, or is that somewhere else?
That is under the direct charges. You'll see from 22 to 23, it goes from 30,000 to 90,000.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
And Chair, if there aren't any other questions, then just like the normal budget process, we would need to open it up for public comment before we move into motions.
Is there any public comment? Okay. Does anyone on the committee have any questions or concerns right now that we need to address? Josh?
Just in an abundance of caution, I do serve on a nonprofit that may benefit from these funds. So I could have a potential conflict of interest, and I just want to state that for the record.
Okay. So I think the next thing we do is apparently we must approve tax increment funding. Is that right?
Yes.
So
and there's a potential motion on the screen.
So if somebody could make a motion, I'm not going to read that. Brian?
Sure. I move the Budget Committee of the Grants Pass Urban Renewal Agency approve the property taxes for the 2022-2023 fiscal year tax increment for the maximum amount of revenue that may be raised by dividing the taxes for the Grants Pass urban renewal plan area under section 1C, article 9
Yeah.
of the Oregon Constitution and RS chapter 457.
Nice job. Can I get a second? Second by Josh. Any discussion on tax increment financing? Okay. Those in favor, would you just go ahead and one by one, let's do it like we did last time.
Yes.
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 Excellent.
And
Now.
we have one more motion.
We have one more
Chair.
motion. Hang him right there. There it is. We need a motion to approve the budget for the Urban Renewal Agency. Oh, gosh, a volunteer. Valerie.
I move that the Budget Committee of the Grants Pass Urban Renewal Agency approve the budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023 in the amount of $3,670,000.
Good. I'm looking for that there it is. Good job, Linda. Okay, discussion? Okay, those in favor?
Yes.
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 I believe we have completed our mission. And there were a lot of good questions through all the days, a lot of good discussion, motions made that didn't get passed, but they were good to discuss. I thank all of you, but we are adjourned.
Thank you, Tom.